Everybody, welcome to our first in our negotiation series this week of our webinars. Thank you for all for joining us. It's obviously something that a lot of you are interested and care about. Like I said, we've been oversubscribed on our plan here in terms of what we can do with Zoom. It's nice to see so many people with their faces on and your camera on. See is that your son next to you? I saw as well. Good. It's nice to see. You know, we're all human beings doing our own thing. So yeah, look, I always encourage people to get their cameras on. It's a much more engaging experience for everyone, for us to go through this today. So look, what we're going to do today, I'm going to take you through what I refer to as kind of fundamentals of negotiation. This is all taken from and based on what's called the Harvard program on negotiation. Now, if you know all this stuff, then great. Maybe we can give you a couple of reminders of things. If these are new concepts to you, then fantastic. So basically today I'm going to run the framework for you. Now, what I always say is that the Harvard framework is good. It's excellent, right? Because it's easy to understand how it all pieces together. However, and I'll choose those words carefully because we're talking about people who are a lot smarter than I am. It's built on logic and process, okay? Now, when you're negotiating with people, people are not logical and process driven. You might think you are, but we're emotional beings. So on Wednesday, what we're going to come back to is we're going to talk about how do we now talk to emotions. And I'm going to kind of incorporate some tactics from a guy called Chris Voss. If you've ever read his book, it's called Never Split the Difference. And what we're going to cover is kind of taken from there as well. I highly recommend it. He was the lead negotiator or hostage negotiator for the FBI. International hostage negotiator, and his book is amazing. And he attended the Harvard program on negotiation and realized that he had stuff to teach them as well as learning from them. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine the two, but really today is about laying the foundation for where we're going to go from. So without further ado, I will kick into my slide deck. So bear with me 1 second. Okay, I just need to bring everything to life. Now, all going to plan, you should be able to see my screen here. Now, what I will say to you is at the top of your screen, you can't see this on mine, but if you scroll up on your bar, there is a kind of a control piece, and it should say more. And if you click on more, there'll be a piece down there, or it might say viewing options, sorry, and it says side by side. And if you select side by side, not only do you get to see my nice clean slide, you also get to see my wonderful face as well. If you don't want to see my wonderful face, then untick that, but obviously that's your preference. So look, first things first, if you've attended any of our bits before, you know that we like to make them as interactive as we possibly can. So I'm going to do a couple of things today. We're going to roll out some pieces here on a poll everywhere. So what I'll ask you to do, whether you want to open up a new tab or you want to run something on your phone or another device, what I'm going to ask you to do is go to this email address or this website here, which is pollev, pollev.com/IgniteTrain999. Alternatively, if you've got your camera phone, you can simply scan that QR code there and it will take you through to that as well. So I think because we opened that one to test it, we've already had a few responses to our first one. So anytime you see the screen with a poll, you will see that address at the top. So if you're not quite into it yet, don't worry about it. But really what I'd like to do is to get this as interactive as we possibly can. So look, my first question really is to ask you guys, what do you negotiate on? And I'm looking at a lot of the stuff like price, service time, external suppliers, volume of order, sales, budgets, all of these things, yeah, make sense. And I like to call them in a loving way, the boring stuff. If you look in the top middle, that's the kind of stuff that I like seeing is various points with husband. Essentially, really what a study timetable with kids, good. So what I'm trying to really kind of get across from this is to understand that negotiation is something you do every single day of your life, whether you know it or not, whether you're conscious of the frameworks or not. So not only will what we're going to do with you over the next 2 sessions, which are, kind of 2-hour-long sessions, give you some more thought process and framework to be better at negotiating with external suppliers. It's also about maybe how can you get your husband to do things, your wife to help you with things, your kids to go to bed on time. And really what we're doing is we're really just giving you some insights into some communication frameworks. Some of the stuff that we'll cover on Wednesday is really touching into the human kind of psychology of interacting with people. And just to be clear, never, ever, ever, ever do we use these to manipulate, okay? It's not manipulation. Obviously, you know, people will use some of these tactics and others to manipulate to get what they want. What we're looking to do is to influence people, okay? That there is a key difference to that. So look, a lot of the stuff on here, salary. I love the fact you put salary up there. I'd be really interested to know, and on the chat function, you'll see there's actually a place where you can just raise your hand or just give a thumbs up. I'm interested, how many of you actually have ever proactively negotiated on your salary as well? Because that's something else that's really important. By the way, just so you know, particularly for women, there's research that shows that men are much more likely to negotiate their salaries than women will, which once again contributes to the gender pay gap. That's not to say women can't negotiate, but there's a lot more, how can we put, social pressures that go with women that don't carry on with men. And there's that's a conversation for another day, I believe. But once again, that's something that we too, and I'll quote Sheryl Sandberg's title of the book, something we need to lean into there as women, as people, not just women. Girlfriend data, right? So there's loads of stuff, everything, with the monocled emoji. So look, really the first thing I need to define with you is there's two types of negotiation. The first is what we call a distributive negotiation. And you might be wondering why there's a piece of pie in the corner. Well, that's my analogy. In distributive negotiations, what we have is one pie and two hungry people. And in a distributive negotiation, the objective is to get for each side to claim as much of the pie as possible, okay? What that really means is we usually end up like this. And this is why a lot of people kind of shy away from negotiating, really, because they deem it as a form of conflict. And strictly speaking, it is a form of conflict, okay? You have disagreement points, but really the process of negotiation is working through that. So we have distributive negotiations, which is really where you get people going, I want this, I want this, I want this. And it's what I then refer to as the kind of souk mentality, where it's a question of, I'll give you 50, I'll give you 25, and then you end up working in the middle. Even like I said, the title of Chris Voss's book is Never Split the Difference. I mean, his concept, right, is he was a hostage negotiator. So he said, you know, I can't turn around to someone and say, well, I'll tell you what, you give me 3 hostages, you keep 3. But it really does make you look at it in a different sense. Now, the next piece that we look at is what we call an integrative negotiation. And in an integrative negotiation, I'm going to use the concept or the analogy of the pie again. And what this means is, once again, there's one pie, 2 hungry people. And in an integrative negotiation, what we're trying to do is interrelate the issues and understand the other side. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to create value for the other side in order to claim value for ourselves. Okay. Now, what that means is I might be saying to Hassan, for example, look, I know that there's only one pie. I've got a big workout and I've got this presentation later. I'm really hungry. I need my energy. If I can get 2/3 of that pie today, I'll buy you a whole new pie tomorrow, or I'll make you a new pie from scratch tomorrow. Now, if he values that enough and he doesn't actually need what the pie today, then what I'm doing is I'm trading something that I value a little less for something that he values a little more. But really what we're trying to do is not physically, but make that pie metaphorically bigger to put more value into it. And once again, that's something that we'll cover off a lot more detail in Wednesday, because particularly negotiating in tough times, that is a key part. How do you create value for the other side? How do you claim value for yourself? Okay, so I'm going to take you through those steps. But just so we've got a clear understanding. Look, one of the first things that's really important for us to understand with negotiation is most negotiators, and when I say that, I mean people who are not trained or well-versed in negotiation, end up focusing on positions. So once again, if I come back to the guy in the market, it's 100 dirhams for this, you know, set of gifts or whatever it might be. Now, what I'm focusing on now is the money. That's his position. And it's the classic iceberg analogy, right? Underneath that is his hidden needs and his hidden interests. Now, if I can look below the water and I understand what are his interests, what's driving this position, and I can now start speaking to that interest, that's where I can create value for him. Because I can't pay you 100 dirhams, $100 for that item. However, if I understand what's driving your need for that, maybe there's something else that I can offer you that you're going to value that's going to mean that you'll drop the actual price. Okay. The other thing as well is I'm using the example of price quite a lot. And please bear in mind, price is only one facet of a negotiation. And it's often a facet that people get overly hung up on as well. Okay. So it's not just about the numbers. All right. But we'll come to that a little bit later. So this is essentially the model that we look at when we look at negotiation. And there are essentially 5 tactics that you can, and I use this word deliberately, that you can choose. It is a choice. Now, most of you will have a default position. As with most things in life, if you do something in a certain way a certain number of times, that's your default way of dealing with it, your comfort, your preference for the way you deal with that. So the way we look at negotiations is if, and by the way, think about any negotiation that you just listed on that board, whether that is negotiating with your husband, trying to get your kids to bed, trying to get a better price from a supplier. There's 2 facets that are in play here. The first one is what we refer to as your concern for outcome, okay? So that's, can I get the payment terms as long as possible? Can I get my items delivered quicker? Can I get the price lower? Can I get it, whatever the outcome of the deal is. And then across the bottom, we have our concern for relationship, okay? Now, here's the thing. We're trainers and we like to use our little 2x2 matrix. So I'm going to do the same thing for this as well, because it provides a nice framework for us to look into. So look, what this does, it gives us 5 behavioral choices that we're allowed to make, or that we can make when we walk into a negotiation. Most people will walk into a negotiation, if they're not aware of this, certainly self-aware and have some training behind them, and they will fall into their default position, okay? And we're going to explore what some of those look like with you very, very shortly. But really what we're looking for you to do is understand where your default position is. That's where you're the most comfortable. For those of you who've ever run through our jigsaw program, we talk about writing with your strongest hand, right? So that if I give you a pen and say, write your name, you would just use your right or left hand, which is your dominant hand. If I ask you to write with your other hand, of course you can do it. It just takes a little bit more thought process and energy. It's an easy one to do, and you can all do this as now. It's the same thing as you'll just sit back now, and I can see some of you, so I know if you're doing it. Sit back now and just fold your arms. And if you're sitting there with your arms folded, this is essentially the same way you folded your arms for, how old are some of you? 15, 20 years. You look very fresh and young. But if I ask you now to change the way and fold your arms the opposite way, it feels really weird. And some people can't even do it. Like, it takes some thinking, okay? And that's because it's about your default setting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into these behaviors with you a little bit, and I'm going to get a little bit of input from you through our poll everywhere. So I'm going to ask you to engage in this with us. So the first thing I'll ask you to do is, if someone has a high concern for outcome, but a low concern for relationship. So it's a high concern for outcome and low concern for relationship. What kind of behaviors might they display in a negotiation? Okay. And what I'm going to ask you to do is jump onto your poll everywhere again and just give me some thought. Okay, perfect. These are exactly the kind of things that we're kind of looking for to come in. Okay. So aggressive, hostile, push, sales, authoritative. Yep. Bold tactics, cold, pushy, competitive, narcissistic. Okay. Short, long-term business. That's the view, the short, long-term business. But what is the behavior that we're going to see from that negotiator? Okay, rational, hostile, selfish. Now, here's the really interesting thing. I would say if I was to kind of look at this, egotistic, I would say maybe 85, maybe 90% of those words in there, we could argue are have negative connotations. The words selfish, aggressive, pushy, egotistic, over my dead body, right? So these are some of the things that we're going to potentially see. So when you often hear the term hardball negotiation, this is really what we're talking about. We're talking about people that have no concern for the people they're dealing with. What they're worried about, and their main concern is, am I getting the deal that I want? Okay. Is the price right for me? Is the delivery time for me? Is the quality right? Whatever it might be. Now, here's where we fall into our grid with this, is we end up with people who are, there we go, who are extremely aggressive. And if you're familiar with this Will Ferrell film called Talladega Nights, he has this concept: if you're not first, you're last. And this guy does everything to win Essentially, it's a comedy, right? So don't read too much into it, but including taking his own friend out of being able to win the races and stuff like that. So his mindset is extremely competitive. And that's the term that we use in this box here, which is competing. So up here, we are in that mindset. And I put those terms in that people are a little bit more familiar with to think about is that I win and you lose. Now here, you might be thinking, why on earth would I want to choose to be like this? If I've just looked at some of those words, I don't ever want to be seen or perceived in that way. But the fact of the matter is, if it is the right tactic for you in the right situation, in the right with the right people in the right time, absolutely do it. Now, what you've got to think about here is, in what terms would I use this? Now, easy one in business. If you are doing a single transaction with an organization, okay, this might be something as you're going out and you're buying 50 new computers, all right? And you know that you're not going to be buying new computers for another 5 years, then your concern for a relationship with the supplier that you deal with is going to be relatively low. What you want to be getting is the best possible specs, the best possible price within the best possible time frame. So what that means is that in order to get the most out of that from that tactical point of view, is to lean into that competing space. Now, a lot of people find that quite uncomfortable because, once again, if you look at some of the words that we looked at there when we talked about the perception of that behavior, a lot of those are negative. But what we want to do, if we turn that around and say aggressive, instead of being aggressive, if I was to say to you, look, one of the key skills that we work on here is lifting your assertiveness. And what that means is being sure of what you can offer and what you can ask for. All of a sudden, that changes that concept. The difference is in its delivery. So whether that's tone of voice, facial expression, whatever it might be, that is a critical element to how we start shifting our own perception of those areas, okay? So the next one we're going to look at, and once again, I'll ask you to jump into the poll everywhere a second. If someone has a low concern for outcome and a low concern for relationship, so think about that one. So they don't really care about getting their outcome from the deal, and they don't really care about a relationship with that person. What kind of behaviors might we see again from these people? Formality, maybe? Anything else? Oh, sorry, did I just click off that second? Oh, there we go. Okay. Danny. So yeah, okay, so we've got take anything, yeah, maybe, careless, indifferent. That's a great word, right? Indifference. Nah. Take anything, passive, diplomatic. Yeah, passive, because I've got no skin in the game, to use quite an American term. Rude, that once again, they might be perceived as rude if they're not interested. Slow to respond, uninterested, indifferent, politically right. Okay, indifference, not a negotiator. Actually is a negotiator, but it's about how much effort and time you need to put in. So once again, that's why it's a choice. Unprofessional, maybe not. Okay, so once again, we do have this conversation about bastard. That's a great one. This is a question where we have people coming in and saying, well, why would I ever choose to have no input to this at all? Really, this is when you're involved in a situation where almost like you're involved in the negotiation, but there's nothing in it for you, okay? It might be a question of dealing with a colleague or maybe your husband or wife, right? It's like, so I just read one on there, don't care attitude. That's the kind of thing. So what you've got to think about is it worth you putting any effort to this? Let's take something really simple. Husband, wife, friend, whoever it is, you're deciding what to see at the cinema. You don't care. You just want to go to the cinema and eat popcorn in the dark room, right? What you see, you're kind of irrelevant about. So you've got no real concern for the outcome, but also we're not really worried about lifting the relationship by saying, look, you choose, I'll come and do whatever you want. She's like, yeah, I don't care. I'm kind of indifferent to that. So what we're going to do is we're really making a choice not to invest energy into that. What you understand, if the value of the deal that you're looking at, whether that's a business or a personal piece, is not valuable enough and you don't see any gain in it, then don't engage in it, okay? So potentially unskilled is if you know, that is a potential if people aren't choosing the tactic and that's their default setting, 100%, yeah? Okay, let's have a look at the next ones here. So this is the kind of attitude that we get here, and I label this as a lose-lose, right? So do you want to get shot in the crotch or shot in the mouth? That's you know, it's not kind of what we going to get into. So by essentially by not engaging in a negotiation by that tactic, you don't get anything out of it. The other party don't get anything out of it. But what you've got to understand is, has that choice just saved you time, energy, effort, whatever it might be? Okay. So what we label this is avoiding. I don't need to negotiate with you. So we're just going to both step away from that. No one's going to get anything out of the deal. Okay. So the next one we've got, and you'll get the idea of the kind of rhythm to this now. If someone has a low concern for outcome, but a high concern for relationship. So think about that. Low concern for outcome, high for relationship. What behaviors might they display? I'll just give you a second to pop that on. Okay, agree to disagree, pushover, tolerance. Someone's put long relationship. Yeah, that's the outcome, but what are the behaviors? That's really what I'm looking for, is how might that show up? Accommodating to others. Yeah, okay. So 2, carrying. Okay. Greedy. Okay, I'm interested where we got greedy from, because once again, it's I'm not worried about getting an outcome. I'm worried about the relationship, or my concern is the relationship. Softy, oh bless. Soft, pushover, lover. All right. So once again, they're submissive. There is also some pieces here which I would then, once again, have negative connotations to. Patient, has long visions. Okay, potentially that's a good way of it. Wants service, giving up my own interests. Yeah, that's really what we're kind of getting into. And really what we're looking to here is, once again, let's go back to that example of buying 50 new computers. If you're buying 50 new computers, and not only are you going to buy the piece of hardware, but you want that same company to be servicing your IT contract for the next 5 years, and you know they're going to be a key stakeholder or a key partner for you, your attitude towards them 100% should change. You should be looking at, okay, what is it that I need to put into this to make sure we get good service moving forward? Okay, someone's even put that there, want service. And once again, if you think about some of the negotiations you get into with your husbands and wives and children, a lot of it is kind of giving up your own requirements in terms of these for the sake of the relationship. Hopefully you are paying into, your relationship bank account, you're creating a dividend for yourself, hopefully to be able to spend it later on when you need it. So really, look, some of these terms here, submissive, yeah, we might see that, or it might be the perception. But once again, if this is something we are choosing to do, then it's not submissive. It's actually an assertive choice. What we're saying to you is, look, do you know what? I'm going to, and I'll use an example from my world. If we're dealing with an organization and they're just looking for a 1 or 2 day program and that's it, I've got no real desire or drive to put too much into that. When we put something together, as a custom program, it takes a lot of time and effort, and then to deliver it as well. Now, if someone comes to me and they says, look, we're looking for a longer term relationship, or we're looking to do something over a period of months, that has given them much more power, for want of a better word, to make me think about, okay, well, what can I do in order to get the most out of this from a relationship point of view? And once again, because it's just the way that we seem to be geared, particularly in this part of the world, that always takes us to price. But it's not always about price. It's a question of, that's fine. I might accept slightly longer payment terms if I know that we've got a volume of work there, right? I might consider, potentially playing around with the price if I know there's a volume of work there and it's guaranteed. So once again, we'll often put stuff forward to try and create that longer term relationship. But at the end of the day, if I don't get the same sense from the people I'm dealing with, then I literally will have to go to that, well, I need to focus on outcome. So this is my price. And because there's nothing off the back of it, we're not going to gain anything from any resale or rework, then I'm going to kind of put my marker in the ground. And if I lose the deal, I lose the deal. And that's where I'm quite okay. So you can see I go from potentially one part of the box, which you haven't covered yet, then into the relationship piece that we're looking at now, then into the competing, and then I go to avoiding. It's like, well, it is what it is. I've given you my price. I've given you my package. I'm confident that we can deliver value for you. The decision's yours. And if the decision doesn't come through in our favor, it is what it is. And I'm quite comfortable walking away from that. So, okay, I just spotted one at the bottom there, being human. I like that, particularly at the moment. I think from a lot of people I've spoken to, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, there is a definite feel that there is more of a understanding of how connected we are as people. And I'd like to see some longer term changes come out of that. That's kind of my vision for the future. So being human, once again, understanding that people have their own, remember we talked about interests, and what's underneath those is their hidden needs that we need to understand. So once again, driving towards relationship can actually help you do that. So look, here's something I have deliberately chosen as a picture here because it looks quite negative. I'm not too sure why I've got a squiggle all over it. But the reason I've chosen that is because this is how some people perceive this to be. Someone's drawing on my screen. Who's doing that? This is the way some people perceive this to be. So they avoid it at all costs. They go, well, if I go into negotiation, I don't get what I need, then I'm not a good negotiator. And you know, if I have to take a beating, then I'm not going to take it. And once again, this is where our ego starts to come back into play here. It really and truly is not the case. Sometimes it's just a question of saying, I need to give this up in order to get a better relationship, to get more out of this deal moving forward in the longer term. Okay. Oops. Come back. All right. So what we refer to this one as in our model is accommodating, and someone even used that term there, to accommodate. Let me just see. I'm not too sure why that's suddenly on there.
Somebody's just annotated it. They have to remove it.
Oh, so someone else has driven on my slides. Okay. All right. I don't know. Sorry, go on.
There was a question related to the outcomes at the moment. Somebody has asked, is it possible to use all of the negotiation tactics in one session? I assume that means one meeting.
Yeah, I mean, look, negotiation is usually a process. You know, a real proper negotiation can happen in one meeting. There's a reason for you to spread it out over a couple, because you want to learn a few things about the other side. But yeah, look, absolutely you can. I just gave an example there of where I've been negotiating with a client, and I would move around that grid based on what I'm getting from that other person. So if I'm going in there with the concept of trying to get the best deal, you can see the pattern, right? That we're going to soon get into a win-win. If that's my mindset going in, but I'm dealing with that person, I can see 100% all they're focused on is getting the best price. But look, we're probably not the right people for that. I guarantee you'll be able to go out and find a training provider that will charge you 70% less, or yeah, well, maybe not that much, but certainly, you know, 30, 40% less than we will. But I've come across those people in the market, and when that happens, you often then get a phone call 2 months later saying, can you come in and fix it? So I'm aware of the value. My job then is to say, can I demonstrate that value? And then this is where we link that into a sales conversation, right? How do I demonstrate that value? Because if I'm not able to demonstrate the value and you don't see that's something that's going to be a benefit for you, then of course, why would you want to move around that grid with me? But yes, the idea is that I need to go in with a certain mindset, and there is an element of preparation and practice. If it is a big deal, I always recommend role playing it with a colleague as well before, and having that in your mind going in, but knowing that you're going to move around that grid to a certain extent. Okay? But yeah, it is possible. Doesn't always happen. It is possible. But as with anything like this, if you are conscious of what you're doing and you are mindful in the moment of what you are saying, what you are doing, and here's the important thing, how you are feeling. And I'm going to talk to you on Wednesday about reacting to raised heartbeats and shallower breathing and things like this. This is a really important piece of how we control ourselves and make sure that we can use both the rational aspect of negotiation, but also the emotional aspect to best serve our interests, the interests of the other people we're dealing with. Okay. I hope that answers the question, and there will be an opportunity to kind of double check that with me if we don't have clarity as we move forward. Awesome. Couple more. If someone has some concern for outcome and some concern for relationship, right? So as you can see there, right in the middle, we had a box which is not high on either of our scales, but some and some. Once again, what kind of behaviors, and it's the behaviors that I'm looking for, might you see with somebody? Moderator, yep. Cooperative. Balanced, yeah, okay. Perfect, okay. The word perfect, I would love to challenge, because in this, the perfect negotiation behavior is the one that best fits the scenario. But I understand where that is coming from. I really do. Balance, get best of the deal. Okay, unfortunately, when you're in this box, you don't get the best of the deal. And I'll explain why in a moment. Cooperative, stern, maybe. Coaching, okay, so we're using some coaching language. Willing to listen to understand, yes, you're absolutely going to get that. Middle point, good. Good negotiator. Okay, so here's the thing where someone said good negotiator. Intelligent, okay. Intelligent, once again, if it is a choice. If it's just a default position that we've landed in, not so intelligent. And the same, and exactly the same point to whoever's put on their good negotiator. So let me just talk to you about this a little bit. Compromise is really, you have a set of needs and I have a set of needs. And what we do is we end up getting what's in the middle. And if you look at those circles, what that means is I've had to walk away without getting a lot of what I need. And you've had to walk away without getting a lot of what you need. But we've got some of what we need. Now, here's the thing. Most people who negotiate that don't have a training, and by the way, when I talk about training, I'm talking about going to Harvard for a winter program. I'm talking sitting in a classroom, getting online, doing some study, and absolutely role-playing, okay? Most people end up here. And if you think about a negotiation piece, and once again, let's take you back to the souk. I'll give you 50, that's 20, 45, 25, and we end up in the middle, right? That's exactly what we refer to as a compromise. And once again, I'll refer back to Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. His whole concept is that if you are good at your job as a negotiator, you will never land in this middle square. Once again, if it is a choice that you've made, great. I'm never going to be one to say, look, if you've made that choice, you've got it, it's a bad deal. But really what you've got to understand is that we haven't really created value for each other. And what most compromising negotiations compromising results negotiations is an integrative negotiation, sorry, a distributive negotiation, where we're just trying to get the most pie as we can of each other. And what do? We end up splitting it 50-50. So look, if it is a choice, sure, intelligence. If it is a choice, sure, a good negotiator. But really what we're looking to do is move towards one of those more extremes. I'm just very quickly going to see if I can restart this PowerPoint show and see if I can get rid of the squiggles.
Russ, you can go on to view options and you should be able to just clear it when you're sharing the screen. So as you're viewing. On my Zoom or my PowerPoint? Yep. On your Zoom, it says view options right at the top where you're like sharing the screen, and you should be able to remove annotations.
Right, I don't have that, but anyway, it's fine. That's fine. For some reason, it's not on mine. I don't know if you can as a co-host, Ben. Okay, so that's our compromise box. And the last one, once again, if someone has a high concern for outcome and a high concern for a relationship, what kind of behaviors might they be displaying in a negotiation? Okay, people's manager. Okay. This is the only thing that I miss about being in a room with people, because I'd love to explore that a little bit more. Okay. High concern for relationship, high concern for outcome. So tactical, win-win, 100%. This is our win-win box, right? Well-rounded, assertive. Yeah, that's absolutely some behavior we're going to go and see from there. And that's just assertive in terms of what we ask for and what we can give. Empathetic, 100%. I'm going to talk to you on Wednesday, if you join us, about one of Chris Voss's techniques, which is called tactical empathy. A smarty, okay. Carrying, winner, balanced. And once again, please remember that this grid is that word winner. If you land the deal in a behavioral kind of way that you've chosen, absolutely you are the winner. Collaboration is the key. Yeah, absolutely. That's the term for this box. This is a collaboration piece. Well-rounded, well-trained, cooperation, good energy, comprehensive. So yeah, you are dead right. For those of you that are saying all this, most of this on here, I completely agree with. Strategic. Once again, a strategy could be any of those boxes as long as you're making the choice. And I hope that makes sense. If strategically I decide to do some free training sessions for someone because I'm really interested in working with them longer term, that is a strategic decision. If I've decided, actually, I'm only ever going to work with these people, so I just need to get going to work with them once, so I need to get the best price possible, that is a strategic decision. Okay, so just be aware of how we talk about that. So really, it's exactly what a couple of you mentioned on there. This is collaboration. And this is what we refer to, obviously, as you know, as the win-win. Now, here's one of the things. The further you go up towards this top corner of the box here, hopefully my, oops, come back, go away, come back. This here, the more time and the more effort it takes you to get there, okay? And I promise you, it is time and effort. So what you've got to understand is when we talk about negotiation, people always talk about, yeah, let's get a win-win. Great. But once again, is that what you need? Is that what you want? Is that what you're going to put your time and energy and effort towards? Because if you don't need it or you don't want it, or the other side doesn't need it or don't want it, then think about where else can you go on this grid, and think about it as a map, okay? And once again, if I could remove something from that map, it would be that compromise in the middle. And if I was, you know, let's say, for example, you know, God forbid I was your manager and you came back and said, oh, I've got a compromise deal. And I've said, no, go back. You cannot compromise. You've got to land in one of those boxes. It doesn't need to be to the extreme, but let's come out with something that's going to work for us, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Ben, I'm not too sure if there's any questions on that, because I appreciate we've got about 15 minutes left and there's 2 concepts I want to just cover off before we go. You're on mute, my friend.
No, there's nothing as of yet.
Okay. Okay, no worries. So in that case, what I'm going to do then is I'll take you through, and once again, this comes back to the Harvard program in negotiation. A guy called William Overy developed this with a colleague whose name I always forget. I apologize. He wrote a great book, which is called Getting to Yes. Once again, for people starting out in negotiation, it's a great place to read and start off with. One of their concepts is something called a B.A.T.N.A. Now, I'm worried because my animation seems to be automatic here, but a B.A.T.N.A is a term that you may or may not be familiar with, but it is an acronym. And what it stands for is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And I'm just going to let that sit there for a minute. Okay. A B.A.T.N.A is your best alternative. And I'm going to try a little exercise now and see if we get some of the similar output. What this means is if you cannot do a deal, okay. So let's say, for example, I'm dealing with a construction company, right? And I'm trying to get them to build me a 1-floor building for a certain amount of money. If I cannot get the deal with that company, what do I do? So what we're talking about here is that negotiation with that company is dead. What's my fallback position? And often when I put people into the exercise we're going to do now, I get people who talk about, oh, I dropped my price. No, that means you're still in the negotiation. What we're talking about here is what is your best alternative? So if I can't get the price from that guy, or I'm trying to find, 4 Pirelli tires for my car, right? And I only want to pay 2,000 dirhams or whatever that might be. And I can't get that price from this dealer. Well, what's my B.A.T.N.A? Well, if I go to Al Quoz, I'll find 500 people to sell tires. So I've got lots of alternatives. So this is what I need to do, is start thinking about my backup plans. So let me tell you a little bit about this, and then I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of an exercise here. The first thing we need to think about is the strength of your B.A.T.N.A, right? And by the way, the stronger your fallback position, the stronger your negotiating position. And I'll explain what I mean in a moment. So a weak or no B.A.T.N.A gives the other side the upper hand, okay? Now, here's the thing. As a training provider, I'll kind of reveal, like if you've seen The Wizard of Oz, the old man behind the curtain bit here, is when we're negotiating with people, and let's say I'm dealing with, I don't know, could be Alpha-Tame, Tisla, whoever it might be, okay? When they're turning around to me and they're saying, we want you to do this training and we want you to pay you, I don't know, let's pick a figure, 50,000 for this project. Okay, that's great. For them, they're probably speaking to 4, 5, maybe 6 other providers. So what they're doing is they're developing alternatives to us. We might be their favored provider. They might like what we do. But once again, if they're thinking, right, the price isn't right, or they're not giving us the right trainer or the right training dates, their fallback position is then go and deal with one of our competitors, okay? Our fallback position in that situation is to make sure Ben and Kevin, my sales guys, have a whole range of clients lined up with proposals ready to go. So I don't feel beholden to try and, essentially drop my trousers on price on everything that we do. If, however, we're in a situation where we don't have much business or the clients aren't queuing up at our door, I'm then in a weak position. So if I want any business and that company says, well, you're charging 50, but we'll only go to 35, I'm in a situation and we'll either have to walk away with nothing, as we did when I looked at that auction earlier, or I have to take the 35 because I have no fallback position. So that's why it's really important that you actually build one up. Now, here's the thing. If I'm negotiating with you and I know you've got no alternative, like we're the only player in the market, what does that do to me? It gives me a real position of power, right? It gives me a position to kind of lean into. So those of you that work in sales organizations, when you're talking about your key and your unique selling points, This is a critical thing. If there is a particular piece of equipment or a service or a product that only you provide, and there's nothing else like it the client can go to, you're no longer trading just on the price, right? It's not a commodity, so you're able to trade value, right? So the first thing you need to ask for is how strong is my B.A.T.N.A? Okay, how strong is my B.A.T.N.A? Particularly those of you in sales doing sales negotiations, I tell you now, your B.A.T.N.A is to fill your pipeline. Okay, it's to manage the top end of your pipeline, what we call top of pipe opportunities. It's really important to have those in at the top, because when you get to the bottom at the end of the month and you just need to get a deal across the line, you'll find yourself dropping prices or whatever. And then the scary thing is you're setting precedent with that client. Yeah, but last time you did it for this. And you go, yeah, no, because I was desperate, right? So let's remove that desperation from ourselves. So what do? This is a couple of things to do. One, invent a list of actions you might take if no agreement is reached. And I'd really like you to concentrate on these, because I'm going to throw you into a little activity, and I'm going to show you one more thing. You invent a list of actions. Then we're going to convert some of those more promising ideas and transform them into tangible alternatives. So we're starting to make them real, okay? Then we're going to select the alternative that sounds the best. Now here's something else, and this happens more often than you probably care to believe. Quite often when you do this, your B.A.T.N.A suddenly becomes the better deal. Now all of a sudden, whoever you were negotiating with before, they're either your B.A.T.N.A or in a position where you can say, look, this is the deal, take it or leave it, take it or leave it. So once again, you're able to put yourself into a much better position in terms of a negotiator, okay? So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to just put you into a small group conversation. I'm gonna put you into some breakout rooms, literally 2 or 3 minutes. Here's your scenario. You've got a new baby on the way, okay? And the baby is due in 2 weeks, and you've been putting off selling your impractical two-door sports car because it's not going to work with baby seats. Now, all of a sudden you realize that actually I need to up my game here, okay? I just need to go back into my Zoom a second. So I now actually need to get the deal across the line here. So what I'm going to do is here's the thing. You've advertised your car for $8,000, okay? Now, someone who's really motivated would want your car. They've come in and they've already made you an offer over the phone of $7,000, okay? So you're $1,000 apart. Now, your bottom line that you've decided you can take is 7,700 because you've already put a deposit down on a new vehicle, okay? So there is a big difference here between your walkaway point of 7,700 and their walkaway point of 7,000. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about what could you do to develop a B.A.T.N.A in this situation. And just to be clear, a B.A.T.N.A is not about you trying to do that person the better deal. It's what other alternatives could you generate to sell that vehicle. I've just posted that scenario in the chat, okay? Now we're at 5 to 10, so I'm just gonna do this for 2 minutes. I'm just gonna punch you out into rooms with a couple of other people to make your conversations a little bit quicker. Open up the microphones and throw some ideas out. And then when we come back, I'd just like to get a couple of ideas from people. Okay, so look, thank you very much. So tell me I mean, we had like 15 groups there, so I'm hoping 1 or 2 of you will have something to say. Could I ask someone just to open up their microphone and share with me, please? What could you do to develop a B.A.T.N.A? What did you come up with?
Hi.
Hello, Seema.
Yes, hi. So what we discussed was to create a B.A.T.N.A. One of the option could be to take the car to the resellers who actually buy in old cars to have an idea what kind of price we would get if we were to sell it to them, which gives us a bit of a benchmark in terms of the idea that the person is offering. Is the price good enough, or is it something similar, or is it higher or lower we're going to get if we were to sell it to the other car or resellers?
Gotcha. Okay. So what I would say is that the first bit of that, great, but what we're looking to do is not necessarily create the benchmark, is basically saying that if I can go to them and they're going to offer me 7,200, that is better than the guy that's offering me 7 at the moment. So it's an alternative position. So my idea is that when this guy turns up and he sees how amazing my car is, I'm going to be able to negotiate him up. Okay. I'm going to maybe offer him a few things that I can do to make sure that he pays me a little bit more money. But if I can't get a deal done, I know that I can go back to I Sell Any Car or maybe the Porsche dealer, and I can get 7.2 for that. It's still below what I want, but it's better than the deal I've got on the table. So yeah, that's absolutely one alternative. So look, this is the thing. It's critical that we understand that a BATNA is not about negotiating with that same person. It's about, if I can't get that deal across the line, what else am I going to do? Yeah. If I can't get that car sold to this guy, and by the way, bear in mind, you've got a baby coming in 3 weeks, you're under time pressure, right? So you can't go, well, I'll just wait. We need to get proactive with this as well. Okay. And what that does, because I appreciate it's just gone just over 11 o'clock, it takes us into the last concept I want to cover with you today, which is the concept of, which is called a ZOPA. Now, if you haven't heard this before, it sounds like what Greeks shout at weddings when they smash their plates and glasses on the floor, sorry. That is actually WUPA, not ZOPA. But really what this stands for is Zone of Possible Agreement. And it's really where your overlaps are. So at one end of your zone of, you'll have your BATNAs. And if, for example, we've got this guy saying my highest is 7.2 and you're saying my lowest is 7.7, we do not have a zone of possible agreement. We can't get a deal done. Okay, simple as that. Okay. Now, the reason I've put these squares on there is because ZOPAs are multifaceted, right? It's not just about price. There is many different things it could be. It's service level standards, turnaround times, payment terms, delivery times, quality assurances, service guarantees. There's lots of things that play out into it. But if I give you a really simple example, and this is what most people deal with on a commercial basis, the two elements as a business that we need to focus on is the price that we get and the payment terms. So up here, I've got the buyer that wants the longest possible payment terms possible, but they've got a range, let's say that's 30 to 90 days, and they want to pay as little as possible. So for them, this is the ideal negotiating point here. Long payment terms, low price. I, on the other hand, as the person supplier, I obviously want to get the best possible price and I want to get the shortest possible payment terms. So my ideal deal is down here. So you can see it's the extremes that we're operating at. Bang in the middle of this is our ZOPA. It's where our interests overlap. And what negotiation is about, it's about identifying where this lies. And as I said at the beginning of this session, this is a framework that is built on logic and structure and process, right? Well, getting to this is a little bit more difficult because we're dealing with emotional animals, basically, right? I don't want to reveal this to you. Really what we want to do is if we can understand what their interests are, that'll help us understand where their BATNA is. That'll help us understand where we can create a zone of possible agreement. But at some stages, you've got to realize there's going to be some places that you have to, or some deals you have to walk away from because the ZOPA simply doesn't exist. But if you're aware of these terms, and when you go in and you can plan for these and you can look for these and ask the right questions, that's when you start to elicit some really strong information from your other party. So look, in terms of concepts, that brings us to the end of the session today. So really what I'd like to do is kind of just open this up to any questions that you might have available. There is a place on Poll Everywhere that you can put this in. If you want to open up your microphone and simply ask one, please feel free. If you want to open the chat and ask, please feel free. I've just seen something pop up there. So Ben, is there any questions come in the chat?
Yes, one of them is, well, there's two actually. No, wait, sorry, that's your one. One is, would ZOPA be used as a compromising model?
So the one thing, we covered off basically a behavioral model and then two concepts of negotiation. So a BATNA and a ZOPA can fall anywhere in that behavioral model. So if I'm choosing a competing mode, and I'll give you some of the words back again, aggressive, assertive, those kind of things, single-minded, right? If I'm going in with that, I still need to understand where my zone of possible agreement is, okay? The way I do it is just going to be different if I'm focused on relationship or if I'm focused on collaboration. It's the way or the method I go about doing this, but it's the subtleties in how you deal with each other that we'll cover off on Wednesday session if people are going to join.
Another question. Your presentation isn't live, by the way. Is there an approach or list of questions which could help in identifying the other person's interest?
A list of questions to help identify the other person's interest? Yes. Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. I'd have to put that in the premium product piece, right? Some of that we're going to cover off on Wednesday. Honestly, it's open, emotive questions, inquisitive questions. I don't want to give too much away because that's what we're going to cover up on Wednesday. All right. So there's my hook for you to join on Wednesday, because yeah, there is not necessarily this list of questions you can walk into and read like a robot, but I want to give you just 3 or 4 things for you to be able to think about when you need to understand what they're interested in, where their zone of possible agreement is. Absolutely, there is a way we do that. Yeah.
Another question, I think you've already covered it, but it says, can B.A.T.N.A and Super be used at the same time?
They are used at the same time. Yeah, 100%, because your B.A.T.N.A absolutely fundamentally sets out, I wonder if I can do something a bit crazy here. Your B.A.T.N.A sets out one side of your deal. Let me just move this. Is this going to work? Okay, so if you imagine, excuse me here, this is party A, and over here, this is their B.A.T.N.A, okay? And then over here, we have, oops, party B, and this is their B.A.T.N.A here. Now, what this basically, the other way that this point is referred to in negotiation is your walkaway point. So this is where the deal no longer becomes available. So as you can see, we have a gap. So the B.A.T.N.A tells us the limit that each party is willing to go to. Now, alternative model is if I have party A here, and then I have party B here. Oh no, I've run out of space on my little thing, right? So this is party B, excuse me, I'm using B too many times on this, but this is their B.A.T.N.A. What we've got here in this area here is where their B.A.T.N.A is, where the Zopper is. So 100%, they're not separate concepts, they are combined. You know, in this first scenario here, there is no deal that we can have done here because we have no crossover in our walkaway points, okay? So your B.A.T.N.A, and please bear in mind that your B.A.T.N.A here is actually extra work that you're doing to find a better deal, whether that's on price or delivery date, whatever it might be, okay? So the B.A.T.N.A is your best alternative. So as soon as their deal isn't as good as the best alternative, logic tells you there's no zone possible agreement. You might as well go and deal with party C, who do have a B.A.T.N.A that overlaps with yours. Does that make sense?
That's it for the questions, unless you've got any on the poll in the chat.
I will just quickly kick it into life and we'll have a quick look. But I think maybe most people are doing that on the presentation. Come back. That was the questions one. We'll just while this refreshes, what would be the best outcomes to negotiation question you gave us on in terms of the B.A.T.N.A? If it's that one, this is the thing. There is no best answer to that. It's really about getting you to stretch your thinking rather than looking at, I need to get this price for a car and I've got someone in front of me. How do I take that pressure off myself and go, okay, where else can I get that from? The next thing, and we would talk about, is if you're doing that as a Zopper, what would you do to create that possible zone? Would you drop your price? That's a very distributive. Or are you going to say, look, a friend of mine owns a garage. I'll tell you what he's offered me. He's offered me 6 months free servicing. So if you can pay me $7,700, sorry, you wouldn't say free, would you? If you pay me $7,700 for that extra $500-600, I'll give you 6 months free servicing with the vehicle. Now what you've done is you've offered something that person might value greatly, particularly for a Porsche, but it's cost you very little because your friend said, look, I owe you a favor, I'll do that, not for you, no problem at all. So once again, and I'm going to talk about this on Wednesday, we're trading concessions, we're trading things that we value little for what the other party values the most. So there's no best answer for that really, it's just about what it is. What is the immediate tips to identify the negotiation falls in B.A.T.N.A or Zopper negotiation falls? Honestly, the way I like to do it is just ask the question. Just ask the question. The amount of people, I just say to them, what is your budget? And they absolutely freak out. And they say things, well, you know, we'll keep that to ourselves. Look, when I ask the question, what's your budget? If you tell me 10,000, I'm not going to charge you 10,000. If we're going to charge, you know, if our bottom price is 12,000, all I'm doing is saving us all a lot of time. So I'll be honest, I think there is an element of culture that plays into the Middle East. And I'm not saying it's always like this, but certainly when I would do that in the UK, I would be much more likely to get an answer. Not always, but people would say, well, I know my budget, it's set for this, and for this job, I've set aside £3,000. I'd always lift that by 20%, right? Just to kind of think what I would do with it. But here, when I ask people for their budgets, people don't want to share that with me. However, what I will find is that those companies, and maybe some of you are on the call now, that we work with on a longer term basis, if they turn around to me and say, we want to do this, this, and this, and I say, great, what's your budget? They'll just tell me. Because what we've done is we've actually developed trust with them. So I'd understand why up front, if you've never dealt with this before, why do you want to keep that close to your chest? But essentially it doesn't necessarily help the negotiation process. Certainly doesn't speed it up. So the immediate tips is just be open, right? Just be open with what you can do, what you can offer, but also ask for things in return. But once again, on Wednesday, I'm going to help you with some ways that we do that. Open-ended questions, lifting our tone at the end, so it is a question, and making sure then, by the way, the key tip is to shut up, right? But I'll talk to you about that afterwards as well. Awesome. Look, thank you. That's all the questions, Ben. I don't know if there's any more that have come on, but I'm conscious we're a little bit over time, but you know, your questions now put you on your time. So look, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate we started 3 minutes late. I'm sorry about that. We had 160 people sign up for this. So we also streamed it live to YouTube. So we had 100 people on the call. We have 32 people on watching on YouTube as well. If you're going to join us on Wednesday, again, I look forward to connecting with you again. I look forward to seeing the feedback that we've got from you. And I wish you all the very best for your next few days of still being locked in your houses. Stay safe, everybody. Speak to you soon.